Good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Monday, August 9th, 2021. And our top story today, how to save for education, whether it's for you or for someone else. Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Mark Kantrowitz. He's an author and financial aid expert. Mark, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let's talk student loans, obviously an important topic. Before we get into the details about getting, spending and saving for college, let's talk about college tuition. They seem to be going, college tuition, whether it's community college or a four-year school or graduate school, seems to continue to go up. I want to get your thoughts on these tuition rates and what that means longer term for people thinking about sending their kids to school.
Well, and tuition goes up almost every year, just like the sun rises in the morning. During the pandemic, tuition inflation rates were around 1% for public colleges, which is a historic low. But that was during the pandemic when the colleges were receiving emergency funding from the federal government. After the pandemic ends, we can expect tuition to increase, perhaps even at double-digit rates if it follows the pattern of previous economic downturns.
Yeah, Mark, let's talk about saving. We've got kids that are going off to college. Maybe they're doing it virtually still, or maybe they're going to actually go physically on campus this fall. But many students going back to high school, thinking about preparing for college and savings for college. What is the best approach, or what are some of the approaches you can use to put money away for your child, either today or down the road?
Well, there are several specialized college savings accounts: the 529 college savings plans, Coverdell education savings accounts, prepaid tuition plans, as well as non-education accounts like an UGMA or UTMA account, regular old bank or brokerage account, or even a Roth IRA. I tend to recommend the 529 college savings plan because it has the best combination of tax and financial aid advantages.
And let's break that down a little bit. So many states, I don't know if all the states, but many states offer a 529 program. They're all unique to each state. How do I find, if I live in North Carolina, how would I find the best program for my son, daughter, or niece, nephew?
Right. So all but one of the states offer at least one 529 plan. They are typically in one of two types: a direct sold 529 plan where you're investing directly through the state, and an advisor sold 529 plan where you're using a financial advisor to make your investment decisions. The fees on the direct sold plans tend to be lower, but you then are doing it yourself instead of relying on the advice of a financial advisor. To find these plans, one of the best resources is savingforcollege.com. They have detailed information about the investment options and the state income tax benefits and everything else you ever wanted to know about each state's plan. Now, you're not limited to investing in a particular state's plan. You can invest in any state's plan, but there are some trade-offs. The fees that are charged differ by state, and the tax advantages differ by state. About 2/3 of the states offer a state income tax deduction or tax credit, but all but 7 of them require you to be investing in the state's 529 plan. On the other hand, you might be able to get lower fees from an out-of-state plan. There's an inflection point when your child's young. It's better to be in a plan that has lower fees because you're amortizing the cost over a longer period of time. For when the child enters high school, it's better to be in a plan where you get a state income tax break if your state offers one. Now, if you're lucky, your state offers among the lowest fees and a state income tax break.
Yeah, and to your point, you either choose to do the research yourself or you go through a financial advisor who directly sells that to you. Is there a percentage of people that choose one path or the other, or is it 50-50 in terms of working with somebody or just saying, hey, I'm going to do it myself?
Most people are invested in direct sold plans. The College Savings Plan Network publishes statistics on the number of accounts and the total dollars invested in the direct sold versus advisor sold plans. And it's heavily weighted towards people investing in direct sold plans.
Now, Mark, if I don't have any children, my wife and I do not have children, but I don't have to have children. I have nieces and nephews. I don't have any grandkids, obviously, but you can direct funds to members of your family for usage down the line in a 529. Is that correct?
That's correct. You can have create your own 529 plan for where the beneficiary could be anybody. It could be yourself. It could be a niece, a nephew, a brother or sister, aunt or uncle. You can choose anyone, or even someone who's unrelated to you. You can also contribute to a 529 plan set up by that student's parent. There are some financial aid differences depending on who the account owner is. But aside from that, nothing should stop you from contributing to a 529 plan, whether it's one that you set up or one that a different member of your family sets up.
Mark, what happens? I have a niece and she's really good. I mean, she's young, but she's really good at gymnastics. What if she decides that she's going to focus on the Olympics? I'm just bringing that up because it's the Olympics that are going on. She wants to focus on the Olympics and not go to school. She says, you know what, Uncle Jeff, I want to be a Olympic athlete. I'm going to be focusing on that, and therefore I'm not going to go to a four-year school. What happens to that money? Can I redirect those funds to, say, my nephew who's a little bit younger, or what happens there?
You have many options. You can change the beneficiary to a member of the family of the previous beneficiary. As the account owner, you retain control over that. You could just keep the money in the 529 plan in case she changes her mind later in life. Just having a 529 plan with her name as a beneficiary will increase the likelihood that she pursues a college education. You can change the beneficiary to yourself for continuing education, or if you decide to go back to school, maybe to get your first college degree or maybe to get a graduate degree. You can take a non-qualified distribution. You'll pay taxes on the earnings portion of that distribution at the recipient's rate, plus a 10% tax penalty, plus possible recapture of any state income tax breaks that you received. But in most cases, you're going to be no worse off than if you had saved the money in taxable accounts, because you will have the benefit of the earnings all along.
And Mark, this money can be used, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is it can be used for, if you decide that you're really good with your hands and you want to go to a vocational school, get some vocational training, or can it also be used for, if, like K through 12 education, like if you want to send a child to a private school?
Up to $10,000 per year can be used for private K to 12. There are also some internship programs are eligible. And there's no time limit on or age limit on when you need to use the money. You could just keep that money in there indefinitely and leave it as a legacy for your descendants.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like it's a smart way to go. Can you estimate, just based on some general numbers, and you don't have to be perfect, how many people in the U.S. take advantage of the 529 today?
About 18% of children under age 18 have a 529 plan in their name. So it's not very widespread, not like 401ks, but with a 401k, every time you change your job, your HR office tells you about the retirement plan and encourages you, or even you have to opt out to not participate in the 401k. Whereas with a 529 plan, your obstetrician isn't telling you about it. The teachers and principal aren't telling you about it at school assemblies or parent-teacher conferences. So there's nobody constantly reminding you of the need and benefit of investing in a 529 plan.
It just seems to me, just hearing you say that, and with such low, less than a fifth, less than 20% of people taking advantage of this, it just sounds like it's an education opportunity. When I say education, a communication, marketing, whatever, however you want to define that, throughout the lifetime. You made the joke about the obstetrician, And maybe that's a good place to start. But we're doing a lot more work around financial literacy for these children in K through 12. Part of that should be, what are you gonna, what kind of job are you gonna have? What's the career? How do you manage money? How do you do budgeting? But also thinking about how are you gonna pay for school? And that education, I would think, would be for children, but also their parents.
Absolutely. I've often advocated for having employers be able to contribute to 529 plans, because that would give their HR office an excuse to tell you about 529 plans as an additional saving opportunity.
Yeah,
and,
well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark.
And in general, from a financial literacy perspective, it's always cheaper to save than to borrow. So
yeah, really,
get started sooner and make it automatic so that you don't need to think to save.
Yeah, and again, that is, I think what you described as the concept that I think a lot of people kind of miss out on. They don't get that in their financial education until maybe a little bit, they go through an experience where they borrowed and then boom, you're stuck with paying off that debt for a long period of time. Mark, I need to take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about how do you go about getting financial aid, taxation, and a lot more. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. We're talking to Mark Kantrowitz. He's an author and financial aid expert. Mark, thanks so much for staying with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about financial aid. I think we've got kids going off to school, hopefully this fall, whether it's virtual or in person, hopefully, and staying safe. Let's talk about all those kids that are now doing the college tours. They're going to great institutions. They're looking at different incentives and ways to pay for the school of their dreams, to get the job of their dreams, at least what they think today. What are some tactics and tips that people need to think about in terms of getting that financial aid for their kid or their niece, nephew in terms of paying for school?
Well, there are two main types of financial aid: need-based financial aid and merit-based financial aid. such as scholarships and grants. So for the need-based financial aid, you will file the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA as it's known, and should file this every year as soon as possible on or after the October 1st start date. People who file it sooner get more grants. Then in addition, and that gets you not just financial aid from the federal government, but also from the state governments and most colleges and universities. There are less than 200, mostly private colleges, that use a supplemental form called the CSS profile form to award their own financial aid funds, but you still must use the FAFSA to apply for federal and state aid at these colleges. Then for private scholarships, there are a variety of free scholarship search sites like fastweb.com, the College Board's Big Future, that you can use to get a personalized match of your background to available scholarships. And then you apply to them and hopefully win. About 1 in 8 students in bachelor degree programs has won private scholarships, and the average amount is about $4,200. I mean, there are some people who get a free ride, but that's relatively rare. I mean, for most people, it's part of the plan for paying for college, but not the entire plan. And I found that parents tend to overestimate their child's eligibility for merit-based aid and underestimate their eligibility for need-based aid. So file the FAFSA every year, even if you got nothing other than loans last year, because predicting how much aid you're going to get is a bit of a black box.
Yeah, I chuckle a little bit because I've heard that parents or uncles and aunts always overestimate the value, what the child can do. But all kidding aside, what percentage in the decision-making criteria should, in your estimation, and in opinion, you're an expert, should finances be in terms of making that decision? Let's just say you want to go to school XYZ. It's got a great engineering program, but it costs Y. How should that factor into your decision making? And you're eligible for Z financial aid. I mean, that seems to me more and more, just thinking about the impact of student loan debt on your finances going forward, that seems like more and more should be a greater percentage outside of just the academic review and considerations.
Well, you definitely should consider financial fit alongside academic fit, social and environmental fit when choosing a college. I recommend using a net price calculator for each college you're considering. And then ultimately, when you do get in and get the award letter, calculating the actual net price to determine how affordable the college is. Net price is the difference between the total college costs or cost of attendance, and that can include tuition and fees, room and board, book supplies and equipment, transportation to and from the school, and a variety of other college-related expenses. Subtract from that the grants and scholarships that you've received from the federal government, the state governments, and the college and university. That net price is kind of your discounted sticker price. It's the amount of money you're going to have to pay from your savings, from your income, and loans to cover those college costs. And that's a more apples to apples comparison between colleges, though the net price calculator is just giving you an estimate, and it's only of your first year. About half of colleges practice front loading of grants, where you're getting a better mix of grants the first year than in subsequent years, kind of a form of bait and switch. So you need to also look at the U.S. Department of Education's College Navigator database to see how the average grant changes from freshman year to all undergraduate students. Then given really that price, you can balance things out.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important.
Right. You don't want to borrow an unreasonable amount of student loan debt. So the more you've saved, the less you need to borrow, and the more flexibility you have to choose a more expensive college than you otherwise could afford. So maybe you start with how much debt is reasonable and affordable. And if your total debt at graduation is less than your annual starting salary, you should be able to repay the student loans in 10 years or less. So you start with that figure, then you have the amount that you saved for college and how much you can afford to contribute each year from your income. That's your total resources. Compare that with a net price. If the net price is lower, then the college is affordable. If the net price for overall 4 years is higher, then you're going to have to borrow an unreasonable amount of debt to afford that college. And that's a trade-off you're going to have to consider.
Yeah. Last question here, Mark, and let's talk about student loan debt and the COVID response. And I know there's been talk about forgiveness, forgiving loans, and we just saw the CDC kind of delay or continue the eviction moratorium. So they're obviously acknowledging what's going on here with COVID. But I want to get your sense for what you're hearing out of Washington, D.C. in terms of student loan relief, student loan forgiveness, what we might hear from the Congress in this last session for the year.
Right. So there's two issues. There's a payment pause and interest waiver, which suspended the student loan payments and temporarily set the interest rate to zero. That expires on September 30th. And then there are proposals for forgiving $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 of debt per borrower. So the payment pause and interest waiver, as I said, expires on September 30th, but there's talk that it might get extended. Democrats have been calling for it to be extended to March of next year. The administration has said they're looking into it. I did an analysis that suggests that unemployment rates will normalize by the end of the year for college graduates, and that many people who do have to still make payments on the loans, like private student loans and certain types of federal loans, are not eligible for the payment pause. They have mostly normalized in terms of their delinquency and forbearance rates. So I think that the most likely scenario is going to be one in which it's extended through the end of the year, especially given that two of the loan servicers have announced that they're not going to renew their contracts. And as a result, they're going to, at the end of the year, and the borrowers are going to need to be switched to a different servicer. You don't want to switch them to a new servicer and then resume repayment at two different points in time. You want to unify. With regard to loan forgiveness, there were proposals during the election campaign to forgive all student loans, to forgive $50,000 per borrower, to forgive $10,000 per borrower. That was President Biden's promise. And he has reiterated his support for providing some form of targeted loan forgiveness, probably $10,000 per borrower. Now, some of the more progressive members of the Democratic Party have been arguing that the president has the authority to use executive action to forgive student loan debt. He actually doesn't have that authority. It's based on a misreading of the law. And he understands that he doesn't have that authority. But he's asked the Department of Justice and the U.S. Department of Education to report back on what he can and can't do through executive action. And when he gets that report, it'll probably send the ball into Congress's court for Congress to pass legislation to implement loan forgiveness. The main problem that Congress is going to face is the cost of loan forgiveness. If you forgive $50,000 per borrower, that's going to cost $10,000, $1 trillion. If you forgive $10,000 per borrower, it's going to cost $377 billion. If you limit the loan forgiveness to just borrowers who owe $10,000 or less, that still forgives the total federal student loans of a third of borrowers, but it drops the cost to $75 billion. And given that President Biden has an aggressive and expensive legislative agenda, not just student loan forgiveness, he may be limited in terms of how much loan forgiveness he can offer, given that he has to offset the costs in some manner. So I think $10,000 of loan forgiveness is much more likely than $50,000 of loan forgiveness.
Well, as they say in Washington, D.C., we will see, right, Mark? Mark, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning, and we look forward to having you back again very soon.
Thank you.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. We're back again tomorrow, so until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Waiting here for you to take and drink of. Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.